Hi guys, my name is Barry and welcome back to the channel. As you can see, I've got Sean Chandler with me today. How you doing, Sean?
I am doing good. I was up until 3 in the morning, so I actually just woke up. So I hopped in, chugged an energy drink. I'm drinking coffee, so I'm hoping all of that kicks in and I get really hyper really fast so we can talk about movies.
I got up at 10 a.m. this morning, but again, it's 4 p.m. here today, so I'm all fresh with my water. Oh, my son made me a cup holder.
Oh,
Wolfman's
nice.
got ours. There you go. So today we'll be talking about films that shaped us growing up and made us the people. I'm hoping the people that we are today. And we've chosen 5 each. Now, I don't know what Sean's 5 movies are that he has recommended for himself for what has shaped him growing up. So we may have some similar films. We may have identical films. We're both similar ages as well. We're in our late 20s. And so I think growing up, we've maybe got the same picks, but we'll find out. If we've got the same one, then whoever is next to talk about a film, probably best to go into that one that we were initially talking about. Sean, do you want to go first since you're the guest on the channel?
All right. I guess I can kick this one off. We've been trying to make this happen for a while, too. We were on some dates and just always so busy. Things come up, so very excited to finally be here. So I will kick things off with one of the very first movies I remember seeing in the theater, Batman 89. So love comic book movies. So much of my childhood was riding my bike to the comic store with my sister on Saturdays. And the start of the journey that really is even led to me on YouTube and everything like that goes to 1989. Batman came out. And like everyone else, always loved Batman. And that movie was such an event we understand the idea of an event movie even now, but it was like, had a very different flavor to it where there were just toys everywhere. Every McDonald's had like Batman cups. Like it took over all of culture. They even made documentaries on Batmania, the summer that Batman took over. And that's like some of my first memories of going to the movies, being a part of fandom, and also just seeing a movie that had a really distinct style to it. Back when Tim Burton was still Tim Burton, he even makes a Batman movie, and it's just like so. Being Gothic fits Gotham, but it has so many Tim Burton's isms. This is the rise of when Danny Elfman was first emerging kind of on the scene and does just this absolutely epic score. And so I got the VHS tape as soon as you could buy it and watched it on loop, and like maybe even had the same one that had like the Warner Brothers club at the beginning of it where they're selling stuff and there's a little banter at it, and there's a Diet Coke commercial with Alfred ordering Diet Coke for Batman while he's driving in the Batmobile. Just all of this stuff. Remember all of it. Shaped so much of my childhood. Watched it all on loop. So that one is the first one that comes to mind.
That's a great choice. I never thought of that one, and it kind of helped shape me as well, but it's not on my list. And I think the funny thing about Batman, and like you mentioned, it was advertised for all audiences, like kids and adults and things. And over here in the UK, it was a 15. So only adults could go and see it, or 15 and above could go and see it in the UK. But the funny thing is, every time we saw an advert, a commercial for Batman, it was mostly aimed at kids, like buy the Batman toys, buy the Batman costumes. So us as kids, I couldn't go and see it at the cinema. I was too young. But I loved Batman before I even saw the movie because I had the costume, I had the toys. I went to McDonald's and got the toys from McDonald's. Everything was Batman back then. And then when we eventually watched the movie, we didn't care if it was bad, which it wasn't. It was great. We wouldn't care. We just absolutely loved it as soon as we pressed play on that VHS player. That's a great choice. Obviously, Tim Burton was on a roll back then. Just a year later, he had Edward Scissorhands. He had Batman Returns just after it. Again, they might be on your list, I don't know. But yeah, Tim Burton was fantastic back then. Danny Elfman doing the score. Brilliant choice. One that I forgot all about. Absolutely. Great choice.
Well, you mentioned in there about how they had like movies that are marketed for kids, and then you watch them and they're not. He Joy Buzzes a guy. He turns him to crispy, like toasts the guy, and then he starts to talks with him. And you think like how hardcore PG-13 movies could be back in the day, but also back then, like that was the era where they had a cartoon for RoboCop for kids and toys, for Rambo, the cartoon.
Yeah.
They're like all these like intense R-rated movies marketed for kids, and perhaps where more of this list will go in the future that ties into some of it. But like, they tried to get kids to love R-rated things with toys, and that even played into Batman. Of like, yeah, this is not a little kiddie Batman movie, but they I was 7 like when it came out, and like, of course I got to go see Batman. I have to go see Batman.
Yeah, I think we were more hardcore back then, I guess, because there was films that were PG-13 and PG in the UK that just wouldn't be like that anymore with the word. Right. Obviously, the dialogue and things just wouldn't happen anymore. But yeah, great choice. My first choice, I'm actually going to, no, in fact, I won't tell you. There's something I was going to tell you there, but I won't. I'll give it away. But my first choice, I'm going to go with Back to the Future from 1985. It is one of my favourite movies of all time. Still is one of my favourite movies. Oh, you got something to say?
Yes. Well, I was going to say, this isn't in my list, but it was in the runner-up list. I was like, how do I not include this? And you saved me there by including it.
Yeah, I thought maybe you would choose that, but at least one of us chose it, which is good. So it was the first time travel movie that I remember understanding as a kid. When I watched like time travel movies as a kid, I was just like, oh, this is great. Like explosions and stuff, fantastic. But I don't know what it is about the story of Back to the Future. It's a film that if made today for the first time, not a remake, if it was made today, it would still feel so modern. Even the dialogue, everything about it is just so up to date and modern. And I think that's why the film stands the test of time, because it is so great. Everything about it, the acting, cinematography, the score, you name it, everything in this film is fantastic. As a kid, similar to how you're feeling about Batman, as a kid, I wanted to be Marty McFly. I wanted to be that kid. I wanted a DeLorean, even though they were apparently terrible cars. I wanted a DeLorean. I wanted to build a time machine as a kid. Me and my friends actually built time machines that didn't work, unfortunately. So,
man, sorry about that.
So there's so many things that happened in that film that shaped me growing up, because if it wasn't for Back to the Future, I wouldn't like other films, potentially might be on the list, but I wouldn't like other films if I didn't watch Back to the Future. Now, with the music in the film, Back to the Future is actually the reason that I listen to and love 50s and 60s music, which is, it sounds weird. If people listen to a 50s song or a 60s song, if they're not connected to films of Back to the Future, they might just turn it off. But for me, anytime I listen to a song from the 50s and the 60s, it takes me back to the 80s for some reason. And it's all thanks to Back to the Future and another film on the list. But it takes me back to films of Back to the Future. If you want to add anything to it, since you're not using it as your pick, you certainly can.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about one of those movies that it's like a perfect film, that it's a great concept, and then they just did it right. Like they pulled it off. And when you look into some of the background of even the writing of the script and some of the alternative ideas they had for the time machine and all these sorts of, like, the process by which it went from their original concept to the movie that we got, it's like true magic of filmmaking. A series of inspired and accidental things led to a movie where you go, this just holds up. Where you show it to a modern day high schooler, and this is a film that they still go, this is just a really enjoyable film. The idea of meeting your parents when they were in high school is universally interesting and fun. Like you said, the dialogue is just sharp and witty in a way that still holds up. Even like the little pop culture references, it's to a president. And so it still kind of works. Even if you don't realize Ronald Reagan was a president or an actor before he was a president, but even beyond that, I mean, I don't know if that's something that you would have known growing up. And still, it works. Like it holds up. It's funny. The performances are so like distinct. Like you just can't fathom anyone else pulling them off. And so, yeah, just one of these movies that absolutely 40 years later, it just holds up wonderfully. People still love it. And, it's another, I remember seeing the video cassette tape in the 80s, like, well, I wonder if I can ever watch that. And I just have these loose memories of like being at a friend's house and like, we're going to watch Back to the Future. Like, it's finally happening. It's finally happening. And a final anecdote. I saw it, I think, on the big screen for the first time about a year ago. Like a local theater just replayed it. And even seeing it on the big screen what you notice not watching it at home is so many little details in little sight gags and things that you miss watching it at home. And even like at the beginning, when it's like panning through the room and the news broadcasts are playing, there's all these little details on there that I picked up on. And so it's like a film that I've literally been watching for 35 years. And I watch it every single year, sometimes multiple times per year, and then rewatch it on the big screen. And it was still discovering new little details that they put so much passion, so much love into it. I guess as a final anecdote, it's a movie that like we always talk about movies having extensive reshoots. Did it ruin the movie? This is a movie that had some of the most extensive reshoots you can have. They recast the lead.
Exactly.
And to redo all this stuff. And it's a perfect film. And it's wild.
Yeah.
Not on my list, though. Not on my list.
Well, just missed out. That's not bad. But just to add to that, I went to see it at the cinema for the 25th anniversary. I couldn't believe it. When I sat down on my seat and then the film just started, I actually looked at my wife and a tear came out my eye. I was like, I can't believe I'm seeing this in the cinema. And all the way through the film, I had goosebumps. I was crying. And she was looking at me like, why are you crying? What is wrong with you? And I'm like, I can't help it. This is like one of the greatest films of all time. I get to see it at the cinema because I didn't get the chance to see it. Obviously, I was only 2 years old at the time, so I couldn't see it. So getting the chance to see it at the cinema and the big screen, it was a dream come true. But yeah, fantastic film. Absolutely love it.
Even just locking in on the score, like even you talk about like getting the goosebumps and everything, like just such an energetic, rousing score that if you even stop and think about the nature of the movie, it's not obvious that you would have a score like that on the film if you didn't already have the film. But you also can't imagine the film without it.
Yeah.
Where it just you throw that score in there and it like parts of it like it has the mysterious intrigue notes that it plays, and then when it kicks into action and you get the main theme going, and just even the full overture version of it with the big opening to it, like it's so unbelievably good in particular in a way that it's not obvious that a movie like this should have that good of a score.
Yeah, you don't know it's good until you actually listen to it, and obviously years on and on and on. Everybody, as soon as you play the first key to the score, Back to the Future, you know it straight away, you know? So yeah, totally iconic.
Keep saying final anecdote, but this is final anecdote. My mom got a new car in the late 70s. What decade is it? Late 90s. Got a new car, and it had some fancy sound system for a car, and they gave us like a demo. Like this will show off just how good it is. Here's a cassette tape to let you know just how crystal clear the audio is, and it was the main theme from Back to the Future. All right. And of course, I'd seen the movie 10 years at this point in time, and that was like the first time like I realized, this is incredible. Like you just like you put it in the push play on it, and no, and you're like, whoa, it's so good. And it was like one of those first time I realized just how powerful a score really could be. And like that just like this weird random memory of getting a demo tape in a car we just bought, and it was Back to the Future. And it was like, well, that's perfect because it's a perfect score.
Maybe you should have put this film on your list, Sean.
If this is how I'm excited for the movies that didn't make the cut, just wait till we get to the ones that did.
Exactly. Well, speaking of which, what is your next film on your list?
All right, I'm going to go with Empire Strikes Back. I suppose in many ways it's the Star Wars pick, so you could say the whole original trilogy. But I'm going to go with Empire Strikes Back specifically because growing up, I had the little storybook. And along with it, I had the cassette tape that goes. Cassette tapes appear to be a major theme in this. Cassette tape that went along with it, where they'd read you the story of the book to you. Which it's one of those things that like that was so common when we were growing up, and it was like, why did they do that? And you go, oh yeah, because back then owning a movie was not nearly as common as it is today. And so you get the storybook and the little cassette. But so that was the one that I kind of listened to that story the most times, and was that movie that kind of introduced me into this world of Star Wars, the space fantasy, the idea of this little farm boy growing up to be the hero, plot twists, so many just like iconic things, but a movie that is kind of, the modern popular version of these timeless epic tales with so many archetypes in it. And like so many people over the last 45 years, that was my on-ramp into that world that, I mean, still to this day, I keep getting to see some of my favorite movies in the theater. 2 weeks ago, I took my son to go see the original trilogy at a theater, and they did a back-to-back-to-back marathon. And as soon as I pitched the idea to him, he's like, absolutely, let's go do it. And he was all on board. And, you know, like literally over 40 years later, 45 years for the original film, people or children still love this world and want to go back to it. And so that was just so, as a child, defining for me, that set me on this path to literally, you know, my son is building Star Wars Lego sets. He used his own money to buy some just this last week. And that's what when he's not on technology, he's building his Star Wars Lego sets. And Empire Strikes Back's the one that kicked that off for me.
Nice. Again, it's a similar kind of feeling that I had to your Batman choice, where when I was younger, we got the toy. I never got a lot of toys when I was a kid, but I got some toys. But my cousins Brian, Michael, and Jonathan, hello if you're watching, they absolutely love Star Wars. And when I went to their house, they literally had every figure of Star Wars, every like battleship, everything you could get, they had it. And I was always excited to go to their house with my 1 or 2 Star Wars toys, and they would have them all, and we'd play them for hours. And I distinctly remember playing with the toys before I seen any Star Wars film. But again, just the Batman and things, we had cartoons of Star Wars, like we had the Ewoks and stuff like that. Yeah.
And there was droids,
Yeah. So all those type of cartoons were coming out at the same time, and they were obviously catered for kids, including the movies. But yeah, I absolutely love the Star Wars films growing up. Now, people might hate me for this, but my favorite Star Wars film is actually Rogue One. And there's just something about it. It feels like Empire Strikes Back meets Saving Private Ryan. There's it's like a Star Wars version of Saving Private Ryan. I just love it. But Empire Strikes Back.
I think it's easily, of the Disney era at this point in time, I think it's like so obviously the best of the Disney era.
All right. I thought that was a kind of rare opinion there, but yeah, so Rogue One is...
I think time has been, like when it first came out, people were like, oh, what's kind of going on here? I heard there were troubles. Why is there footage that was in the trailer that wasn't in the movie? I feel like with time, a lot of people have been like, no, that's the one that actually has creative inspiration. That was like a really interesting idea that puts the war into Star Wars. And so like you said, like Saving Private Ryan, like it's the one that felt like it added something new rather than, you know, Force Awakens I have a lot of fun with, but it's a new hope with a new skin.
Yeah, exactly.
And then obviously Solo, Rise of Skywalker, Last Jedi, all of those have obvious gigantic controversy and fan pushback.
Yeah, but even looking back on the original trilogy, as kids, we already knew Empire Strikes Back was the best out of the 3. And then growing up, it's fun to see our kids watch them, and them also choosing Empire Strikes Back as their favourite. My kids, like Jack, doesn't play with toys that much anymore, but he went through a phase of getting the Black Series Star Wars figures. So he would like every time he opened it and played with them, my heart would sink, because he'd be like, I'm like, oh, that's no value to them anymore. But he's like, I don't care. So yeah, he's got all the Star Wars figures and stuff. Yeah, I'm glad you put a Star Wars film on the list, because I don't have any on my list, unfortunately. So it's good that you've got one there.
Yeah, you gotta, especially, well, if you're anywhere in nerd culture, you got to at least have some Star Wars make an appearance. If we got 2 of us, it's got to happen. So good thing we're like complementing each other really nicely. Each of us filling in an important gap.
Yeah. So my next one, though, you probably won't like this one, because not a lot of people like this film. But for me, it is a film that did help shape me, whether it's cheesy or not. And that is Dirty Dancing from 1987.
Okay.
So Patrick Swayze was a big... character in my house. My mum loved Patrick Swayze. So I would always remember my mum would watch Dirty Dancing all the time. I would watch it with them. I wasn't really paying attention too much, but I loved the fact that my mum loved the film, and she doesn't love a lot of films. So just watching her enjoying herself, watching a movie like that, it made me enjoy it as well. But even when I was growing up, I still appreciated it more as the years went by, because looking back on it, it's a decent film. It's a film similar to Back to the Future, where it made me like songs from the 50s and 60s. And of course, the songs that came out in the 80s were also in Dirty Dancing. So we had a bit of both with the 50s and the 60s, and we had the 80s. And it takes me back to the summers of the late 80s and the early 90s. Whenever I watch Dirty Dancing, especially that opening credit song when they're all dancing in slow motion, I can actually feel and smell the summers of the late 80s and the early 90s, going to the ice cream van, getting like ice cream, coming back to the house, watching Dirty Dancing. It just sounds so cheesy, but it's something that I always remember. I've got films that I absolutely love, like Halloween, Scream, but the memories I have for Dirty Dancing are more vivid than those movies that I appreciate more and love more. There's just something about Dirty Dancing that I'll always go back to. My wife loves Dirty Dancing as well. I took her to see the Dirty Dancing show a few years ago, and we absolutely loved it. I actually understood the story more then than I did in the film, because I don't know if you've seen the movie. Have you seen Dirty Dancing?
Yeah, but it's not one that's ever had meaning to. So I have I've seen it, but like it's just in that code. Like I've seen. I literally have to pause and go, I've seen it, but I don't. It's not like I watched it a year ago and have like a great knowledge of it. It's certainly not one that would be on my list.
But it's got some adult themes. So when I was watching the film as a kid, those just kind of didn't matter to me because I was just watching for the music and stuff. But watching it as an adult and then seeing the adult themes about abortion and stuff like that in the film, I'm like, oof. I mean, why did my mum let me watch that as a kid? But I just didn't care when I was younger. But watching it now, I appreciate it more.
Do you watch the series, or I guess it's done now, but the movies that made us?
I Netflix? Did see a few of them. Yeah, I've seen a few of them.
So they have one on Dirty Dancing, and whenever I watched it, like all that stuff had gone over my head, and then I watched the episode on Dirty Dancing. So that's actually my freshest memories was the making of Dirty Dancing rather than watching the movie itself. And they started talking about stuff. I was like, oh yeah, like those things that they hit so different when you're older than when you're younger. And it and what you store in your brain, of course, dancing images, music connect. And when you don't know how to fully categorize a thing, you forget about it, but it's not like it's not in your brain. And so watching that, it was like opening files of like recontextualizing what I did remember of the movie. Like, oh yeah, there's way more in that movie than just than just Dirty Dancing.
Yeah, and it's not very dirty. It's just a bit of dancing as well. So so that's my next pick. So I know you've not got much to add to that, so we can swiftly move on to your next one if you want.
All right. This will be my watching scary movies that my parents didn't want me to watch. It's not the most obvious of scary picks in the most traditional sense, but also not one that's in any way alien for people. But yeah, so I grew up in a house where like I don't know that my mom, dad ever showed me a horror movie. My mom had like a book called like Demons in the Toy Chest that thought that like Mighty Mouse was trying to get kids on drugs and Ninja Turtles were going to get you to do a seance. And like she it was a short phase of time that she was into this book. So it was like moved pretty quickly on from that. But like she doesn't watch horror movies. So I discovered horror, scary movies, watching cable TV after she went to bed. And so the movie that just stuck out at me is the movie that first like made me like it ended. And I was like, I know I'm probably a little bit too old, but I gotta go cuddle with my mom. It's 3 a.m, or whatever. And that was Predator. Oh, right. So obviously sci-fi, action, horror, all of them kind of jumbled together, but another just like perfectly crafted film that does all those genres so well. And for me as a young kid that hadn't seen anything that had that level of intensity of like, oh no, like those guys were able to take out all the drug dealers, but they barely even know how to even hurt this thing. Oh, wait, they're killing off all my favorite side characters? Is Dutch really going to make it? What? And just the first time felt that actual edge of my seat, like just getting wound up a little bit, feeling all of that. And then just being like a cool action movie, a perfect creature design that still holds up, like all the different things. And also being like I don't even remember what year this was, so I don't know how many Arnold movies I'd seen, but it was also kind of like, I'm going to watch a new Arnold movie? Oh, wow, I saw the poster for this one. I'm finally watching the movie. And so it's all those kind of things kind of combined together, and then at the end of it was like freaked out and was like, had to go cuddle with my mom.
Yeah. And it's not a full-on horror. Of course it's a horror, but it's more action sci-fi as well. But because you're young, you watch that and you're like, oh, right. I'm scared. But yeah, Predator, absolutely love Predator. It's one of those films, kind of early times of fish out of water kind of films, because it still feels like, because it's an alien in the jungle, whereas these guys, that isn't their mission. You know, they're in the war, and this predator comes down and starts causing havoc. So it's a film that still holds up today. Arnold Schwarzenegger could do no wrong back in the 80s and 90s. He was absolutely fantastic. Absolutely love Predator as well. It's not on the list, but there is a film that I'm actually going to say next that links to that film, which is cool. But yeah, absolutely love Predator. Great cast as well. It's one of those macho films where they're all greased up guys that you don't really see much anymore. I think the Expendables films were the last of its kind. But I just love the old-fashioned macho action man films that everybody wants to be better than everybody else. And then you include this alien in the film that mixes it up, because nobody is as good or as big and strong as this Predator. I did see, you've probably seen it as well. Did you see the early concepts of it with Jean-Claude Van Damme? How strange would that film be with him as the Predator? Nuts.
Right. Well, that's like where several of these where you realize like those little changes that were made late in the process. I mean, I guess, happened with Back to the Future, and now with this one, of like gigantic things that dramatically shift the movie into the category of perfection.
Yeah.
But like you said, just a movie that holds up. I've watched this one with my son, and he loves it. Like, absolutely. Like, leading up to Romulus, we're watching through the Alien movies. And he's like, we're going to watch Predator, right? We're going to watch that one too. It's like, well, we don't have time, but of course, yes, of course we'll find a way to make it. If you want to watch Predator, of course we're going to watch Predator. And there's like nothing about the movie that's dated besides the fact that Hollywood shies away from just like that level of unrestrained machoism. Like it doesn't like it's a celebration of all of that, leans into every stereotype of like, there literally starts off with them doing the power shake arm wrestle. Like leans into it, celebrates it, and without any winking at the camera, without any sense of like, well, we need to make sure we categorize this. There's none of that. It's just like, this is awesome. We know this is awesome. Everyone watching it knows this is awesome. Let's go for it. And then let's kill all of them because there's someone even tougher than all of them. But Dutch is still clever enough to pull it off in the end. Yeah.
And it's kind of, it's over the top natural. It's weird. It's like, it feels so natural, but it feels over the top. Brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like the idea of like, I don't got time to like, everything is like, it doesn't in any way come off like a normal person. But it all of it is played straight. It plays like we're set in a grounded reality. That there's these just are the toughest guys on the planet. And I believe them because they absolutely look like it. And then as it goes along, it gets wilder and crazier, but it always keeps it anchored in some sort of reality.
So my next pick is, again, kind of related to Predator. I can't remember who directed and wrote Predator. Who was it again?
It's McTiernan directed.
John McTiernan directed, and it was written by Shane Black, possibly.
So Shane Black wasn't like the credited screenwriter. He was the on-set punch-up guy.
Right,
so they were like, we liked the script that was given to us, but not quite. So Shane Black was cast in the movie, so he's one of the guys.
Yeah.
But he's really one of the guys because they needed him to rewrite pages on the set.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I've watched a few documentaries and I've forgotten most of that.
Yeah. There's so much backstory on some of these.
But leading on to my choice was a film that was directed by Fred Dekker and was written by Fred Dekker and Shane Black, and it is The Monster Squad from 1987. Now, of course, I can't have a channel name called Wolfman's Got Nards if it wasn't a film that was going to be on the list that was going to shape me growing up as a kid. If it wasn't for the Monster Squad, I probably wouldn't have the channel that I have today called Wolfman's Got Nards. When I created this channel, I wanted to give it a name that only makes sense to fans of the Monster Squad or anyone who's seen the Monster Squad. And now and again, you get a comment saying, "Oh, that's from the Monster Squad," and I'm like, "Yeah, you know your film." So if you've seen the Monster Squad, then of course you've probably seen a good few films from the late 80s, and the Monster Squad is one of these films where today it feels like it's classed as the cool version of the Goonies. The Monster Squad and the Goonies are always compared to each other. The Goonies is more of a Steven Spielberg style, fun and fluffy version of a film about kids that go out and have an adventure. Whereas the Monster Squad was the more hip and edgy one, where it felt more realistic, even though there's monsters in this film. The kids in the film felt more realistic to me when I was watching the movie, because the things that they said is more in line with what we would say as kids at that age. But when you watch a film like The Goonies, they say things more Hollywood style and scripted and written, but the Monster Squad felt more natural. I didn't watch the Hammer horror films growing up. I didn't watch Dracula, Frankenstein and things like that. My introduction to those monsters were from the Monster Squad. So the Monster Squad done a lot for me in terms of horror, because it introduced me to things like the Gill Man, the Mummy, Frankenstein's monster, Dracula, Wolfman. Those were the first times I was seeing those characters in the Monster Squad. So if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have branched out to watch other films that included Dracula, Wolfman, etc. But just the Monster Squad itself, it just feels like this edgier version of the Goonies. And even though the film bombed at the box office big time, it still had a really big looking budget. I think the budget was like $10 million and it only made about 3.5 million at the box office. That's bad. But it looked good. It sounded good. It felt good. Aesthetically, it looked amazing. It did look like those kind of Steven Spielberg emblem films of back in the late 80s. Written beautifully by Shane Black and Fred Dekker, and directed brilliantly. And this is Fred Dekker's, I think it was his second film that he directed. He directed Night of the Creeps the year before. So he felt like an up-and-coming director. He was only 27, 28 as well. So it remains a staple in my house. My kids have seen it. My kids absolutely adore the Monster Squad. My wife loves it as well. And the funny thing is, my wife only watched the film for the first time when I introduced it to her. Mm-hmm. And I was a bit skeptical doing that, because if you haven't seen the Monster Squad before, and you watch it as an adult, you might go, but she was hooked. She loved it. My kids love it. And they'll hopefully grow up and show it to their kids as well, if it's still something that people want to see. So, yeah, the Monster Squad, absolutely amazing. Have you seen it though, Sean? I've not even asked you if you've seen it.
I have not. No. It's one of those ones that I've missed it. Whenever I first became aware of you and your channel, I've heard the phrase Wolfman's Got Nards, but I didn't know what it was from for a very long time.
Yeah. It's funny because I was before Dead Meat got massive. I was back and forth with Dead Meat James quite a lot, and he said he done a Monster Squad episode, and he said that he was talking to me. He's like, I was talking to this guy called Wolfman's Got Nards, and I'm like, why is that your name? That's a really strange name. But after seeing the film, I now understand why you're called Wolfman's Got Nards. It's funny because if people say to me like, why is your channel called Wolfman's Got Nards? I'm like, oh, I have to explain myself. So if you don't have to explain yourself, it feels natural. But it's a shame that you haven't seen it. Maybe you will watch it. Maybe you'll enjoy it. I feel like your kids might like it. There's a few moments in it where there's some bad words getting said, but it's a fun film that everyone should see.
Yeah, my kids, generally speaking, they're way more into horror than my wife. Like she did Aliens. Those are like, that's horror to her. That's like, these are so good, but that's it. That's like anything that's like full blown proper horror is a no for her. But the kids are they're into scary things and creatures and monsters. And so anything that I'm allowed to show them to help them down that path that I can get the wife to get on board, I'm cool with. But they love Stranger Things and all of that.
That's what this is like. It's not a horror. It's a fun kids adventure with horror elements. It's like Stranger Things and Goosebumps, the movie with Jack Black. It's more kind of your introduction to the horror, your gateway horror movie. If they ever want to get into horror, I think this is a good kind of segment to get
on-ramp.
Yep, absolutely. So great film. It's a shame you haven't seen it though, but I think you'd love it. But your next choice then, Sean?
All right, this is the one that was tricky for me because I know the franchise, picking the movie, so it was the tricky part. So I'll probably cheat this one a little bit, but I'll go with Star Trek 4, 5, and 6.
Oh,
and I guess you could also throw 2 in there as well. But so essentially, Star Trek was huge for my sister, and my mother in the 90s. Went to Star Trek conventions, like, didn't go to Comic Cons growing up. That wasn't even a thing I was aware of. Went to a lot of Star Trek conventions. Exact same thing, just more focused. Mm-hmm. And there were like 3 different on-ramps to this of sorts. One of them, summer 89, same as obviously Batman 89. Star Trek 5 comes out. Infamously, probably the worst Star Trek film. But we were driving cross country we'd moved from California to Texas, and we were driving back, and we stayed in this middle of nowhere town that had a one screen movie theater that had a balcony, and the only movie they were playing was Star Trek 5. And so, okay, let's go see it. And they wouldn't play the movie if they didn't sell 20 tickets. And so we're up in the balcony, and we're there early, and we're counting every person that walks in I'm 7 years old. I don't know any better that the movie's not some of the better Star Trek. And it was just like, I just have this, that's the most distinct early memory I have of going to the movie theaters. Like very vague Batman 89, very vague Oliver and Company, the Disney movie. But that balcony theater, the story around it, that's like the one that stands out from now 35 years ago. And that kind of started this series of like, oh, Star Trek, what's this? And then the other one, Star Trek 4. Have you seen Star Trek 4?
No, I haven't.
Okay. So it's known as the one with the whales. They go back in time to get whales, and it's a fish out of water comedy. It's like it's straight up a comedy where they're in the 1980s, clueless people from the future looking for whales. But it starts off with this alien probe kind of coming in, and for whatever reason, the alien probe freaked me out. And it just looks like a sausage like flying through space with a ball floating underneath it. It's not scary at all. But for whatever reason, when we watched it as a kid, I freaked out and ran out of the room. So this movie that's a comedy, it is so lighthearted. It's very silly. It was the most mainstream of the Star Trek films. It was the biggest hit until the JJ movie came out literally 25 years later. But it freaked me out because of this alien probe thing. And that's another one of those like distinct with some of the earliest memories of watching Star Trek 4 as a family and me freaking out over this comedy and running out of the room. And then lightly, Star Trek 6 was one of the first movies I was excited about when it came out in the theater. Mm-hmm. And when it released, it was like, wait, there's a new Star Trek movie coming out. Oh, that's so cool. It's the first time I remember like being aware of box office, it opened and it made this much money at the box office. Like all of these little details that are what I do now. And Star Trek 6 was kind of the start of that. So Star Trek kind of has like several of those early touch points of early memory of watching a movie as a family, first theater, Star Trek conventions, and tracking box office, all kind of wrapped up into this kind of Star Trek thing. Mm-hmm. And then we became kind of, all the TV shows and stuff. That was the heyday of Star Trek TV, was the early 90s with Star Trek The Next Generation.
I never even thought that. I know you love Star Trek as well, because some of your early videos you were doing were a lot on Star Trek as well.
Me with William Shatner right here by my desk.
There you go. And again, I'm sure you absolutely
at a convention.
Love. There you go. But I'm kind of feeling the way you did with the Monster Squad now, because I haven't seen any Star Wars movie apart from the J.J. Abrams ones, and that's only 2.
Star Trek.
Oh yes, did I say Star Wars? Star Trek. Sorry, there you go. I'm getting the name wrong. I vaguely have memories of The Wrath of Khan, because I hear that's one of the best. Yeah. But I don't. It's not that I don't like Star Trek. I just don't know anything about Star Trek. I obviously know some of the TV shows, because when I was watching TV with my dad, we would watch like Unsolved Mysteries, then we would watch Cops, and then my dad would watch Star Trek.
Super fun fact. Mm-hmm. There's a segment on Unsolved Mysteries about one of my great grandmother
Really?
on Unsolved Mysteries. I can send you a link to the segment, but it was my great grandmother, all on the maternal side,
Right.
disappeared. And there was this whole deal where they tried to investigate it and everything like that to figure out what happened. And someone went to a psychic to there's this whole thing, and it tied into, there's a whole segment, and there's like they reenact, and that's my great grandmother
Wow.
reenacted when she was 7.
Send me that, because maybe I've seen it, because I've watched Unsolved Mysteries over and over again.
This is one of those little things that everyone our age watched Unsolved Mysteries and the creepiest intro music and everything. Anyway, that's a little bit of a sidetrack, but I just had to mention that.
No, that's a great fun fact, to be honest. That's something you should tell people. But again, I have nothing more to add with Star Trek other than I like the J.J. Abrams Star Trek movie, and I quite like is it Into the Darkness?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That was okay, and I never seen the third one. So unfortunately, I don't have anything to add to Star Trek, because it never connected with me. I think I felt like it was the kind of Marvel versus DC of yesteryear. It was either Star Trek or Star Wars people loved, but obviously not, because you love both. What would you choose if you had to?
So I feel like Star Wars primarily shines in movies.
Right.
And Star Trek is better on television.
Right.
Now, Star Trek 2 is one of my favorite movies. JJ's first Star, I love. It's not that there aren't good Star Trek movies, and it's not that, I think The Mandalorian and Andor are good Star Wars TV shows, but like in general, the inherent nature of what makes Star Wars great is kind of these epic, timeless, archetypical stories.
Yeah.
So you're doing Luke's hero's journey about the fall of the Empire and the rise of this hero. Star Wars at its best, you're doing something so big that really is this grand cinematic adventure. And Star Trek at its core is about discovery and adventures. And so it lends itself to episodic. That was the whole starting point of like every episode we're at a different planet and working through something. And in its truest form is allegorical storytelling. And so tackling modern issues through science fiction stories. So to give you a different perspective without just like staring at the camera and preaching at you. And so that's my cheat answer, is to say that one shines in movies and the other shines in television, which is, of course, a total cop-out, because at this point in time, I think both of them have very good movies and TV shows. And both of them that put out bad movies and TV shows.
Well, that's a fair point, yeah.
So,
have you seen I was going to say, have you seen the movie Fanboys?
No, I haven't. I know I've heard of it.
Oh, it's about a boy who is dying with cancer, and he wants to see the Phantom Menace. Mm-hmm. So him and his friends go on a road trip to go and break into George Lucas's house to watch the Phantom Menace before he dies. And on the way, they bump into Star Trek fans, and they have this big epic fight between Star Wars and Star Trek fans. I thought it was hilarious, and it's the first time I actually realized that there are some people that think if you're Star Wars, you're not Star Trek, and vice versa. But obviously, you're not one of those people.
Yeah, I think it's I get it. We gravitate towards team sports, and mine's better than yours. And at the same time, I think if you just stop and think about it, I think they're totally different genres. Star Wars is space fantasy, like built into it. It's space wizards. Like it's that. There's no any way to try and explain any of the science or anything. And Star Trek is proper science fiction it's our future where things are more advanced, and it's just kind of playing that out. But to me, they're two different genres that don't need to be butting heads with each other. Like, if you want space fantasy where someone can go like this and pick up a car, or not a car, a speeder or a ship, an X-Wing that has fallen into a swamp. You have a guy that can lift things up with his hand, and she's a space wizard. And then over here, that it's actual science fiction. So that's my way of like avoiding the fight altogether.
That's probably the best way to do it. So my fourth choice is a film that I saw in the cinema, and it's the very first movie that I saw in the cinema.
Okay.
However, I was 9 years old when I first went to the cinema. For some reason, my parents didn't take me to the cinema growing up until I was 9. I was coming up for 10. I was 10 this year, and it was Jurassic Park, the very first movie in the cinema. Now, seeing Jurassic Park in the cinema, I thought that if you go and see a film in the cinema, they're all going to look as big grand and great as Jurassic Park. I was obviously wrong after I saw the next few movies, but just seeing Jurassic Park in the cinema, I'm like, wow, this is cinema. This is what cinema's supposed to look like.
And being old enough that you can, I think it was 6 when I first went to the movies, like 6 versus 9. That's a pretty big jump. So like you can actually like understand, wow, this is cool.
Maybe that's a bonus, but I remember everything I'd done that day. My dad owned a little butcher company, and he had the butcher van. He made me and my sister dress up. I had to wear a shirt and tie to go and see this movie. I don't know why. I wore a shirt and tie, went to see it in the cinema. I was blown away because I kept on like asking them, all my friends are going to see it over the summer, and when I go back to school, I'm going to be the only person not seeing it. So that's why they agreed to let me see it. So completely mesmerized by the film. I've not read the book, but I hear the book's significantly different to the movie.
They complement each other really great because they are so different. They're both like perfect versions of what each medium can do really well. Spielberg bringing together music, visuals, groundbreaking visual effects, and just that movie experience, but a streamlined story. And then the book, it just there's more to everything. There's more detail. And so then each of them works really well in their medium.
So I might actually go and read the book, to be honest, because I heard that is really good. But this film came out in 1993, and again, you watch that film today compared to CGI today, and even animatronics, practical effects, it holds up. If not, it's still one of the best looking films. That moment the T-Rex came out of the cage and looked at the two vehicles, it still mesmerizes me to this day. I went to see it in the cinema a few years ago. In fact, I took my son to see it for the 30th anniversary. So my son was only 2 years old at the time. Took him to see it at the IMAX, and he fell asleep 1 minute into it. And I'm like, no, Jack, wake up. But he just wouldn't wake up. So I enjoyed it myself in the cinema, 30th anniversary, just huge IMAX. And I still had the same feeling 30 years prior. Nothing's changed. Everything's still perfect. It's one of the most perfect movies of all time. And it's similar to Back to the Future, where you hear that first musical note and you know exactly what you're about to watch. You hear that bang, you hear the thunder on the ground and the cup shaking. You know what you're watching. Great film. I'm sure you've seen this film, Sean.
I have seen that film. This is another one that was not on my list, but it was essentially on the runner-up list of those pivotal, foundational movies for everyone our age.
Definitely.
That, like as you said, here we are 30 years later, and it's a perfect film that you're looking at. I've heard people say, why isn't every blockbuster like this? I'm like, well, you're talking about a movie that was Spielberg at like his peak and just on a creative hot streak. John Williams at his peak, adapting the best and most mainstream source material from Michael Crichton, who had 30 years of big hit books and everything. And this was just the best and most straight mainstream. So it's like the best on top of the best on top of the best on top of the best. And at a moment in time where groundbreaking technology was suddenly available. So where the best in the game is using it, but he's also afraid of it. And he knows the limitations, but he also is so freed by the possibilities. And so that just everyone at the top of their game, breaking new ground. And it's every time you rewatch it, you go, it is baffling that this looks so much better 30 years ago than so many of these things that are coming out today. And it's one of the great questions of like, how is it that $200-300 million movies and you watch it and you go, this looks like a cartoon. What? 30 years later, what is going on here? But yeah, I mean, just, even when you rewatch it and you realize the dinosaurs don't get out until about 60% of the way through the movie. Like the escape happens at the halfway point. And so the whole first half, it works simply because the characters are so good, the dialogue is so good, and it turns just seeing a dinosaur into this transcendent event for the audience, not just the characters. And so much of that is, of course, Spielberg knowing how to design a sequence, and then you put that score on top of it, like when they first see the dinosaurs and that John Williams score comes in and you're watching their reactions, it's like this is true movie magic of like just understanding how to make something special. That on the pages, they pull up and there's a dinosaur and they see it. That's all that has to be written on the page. But that is like not what the scene is.
Yeah, I mean, their reaction in that scene was probably similar to people's reaction in the cinema, just looking up and going, wow, that looks amazing. The funny thing is, the film didn't just have an influence on us as moviegoers, it had an influence on the way that people get taught in school. Like, ever since Jurassic Park, teaching about dinosaurs went up infinitely. Everybody was interested in dinosaurs all of a sudden. People knew what a dinosaur was. They knew the names of all the dinosaurs. So it was so educational without us even realizing it. And do you know what else? Jurassic Park came out the same year as Schindler's List.
Yeah.
And they were both directed by Steven Spielberg. Yeah. So it was probably the top he's ever, this is his biggest moment. 2 films in 1 year that were incredible. But Jurassic Park.
And almost as far apart from each other as you can get. It's just like the perfect example of Spielberg of in 1 year, he's prolific. Jurassic Park, pretty easily, arguably one of the best popcorn blockbusters of all time. Just fantastic summer movie. When you think summer movie, that's the formula. And then Schindler's List, the polar opposite of that.
Yeah.
But also widely regarded as one of the best films of all time in a totally different category. All the tricks that made Jurassic Park beloved and making you mention it here, none of those tricks really apply directly over to Schindler's List.
Yeah.
Same year.
Just shows to show what a filmmaker can do. And obviously, if he's got the right vision, he can give you 2 masterpieces in the 1 year. Fantastic. That was my 4th choice. Now we're on to your last choice now.
All right, last choice on here. I got to go with my favorite movie of all time, Terminator 2: Judgment Day.
Yes.
So this is one I remember the context of watching it. We were at a family reunion. My mom's side of the family would always do these family reunions in different cities and things like that. And we're at one of these, and her cousin, Ronnie, was like, oh, you got to watch Terminator 2. Like, it's amazing. It's like the best action movie ever. And he's like trying to sell my mom, and she's like, isn't it like really violent? And he's like, oh, no, I mean, it's called the Terminator, but like, he's like, doesn't want to kill people. So he's like shooting guys in the kneecaps. It's actually funny. And he's like selling it as this comedy. And so she's like, okay. And so like, I remember going down in the basement, which I live in Texas. There's no basements in Texas. So even being in a state where there were basements, that was like, I went into a basement to watch a movie. And so we go down in the basement and they put on this movie. And I just remember like Ronnie making the jokes about he won't kill people and watch it. And then the images in my mind being in the basement is the minigun just mowing the cars down, but he's not killing anybody. It's like, this is incredible. This is the most amazing thing that I've ever seen. And this coming right after Jurassic Park, obviously, those are kind of the 2 movies that were the big groundbreaking CGI computer graphics are going mainstream. And it's once again, you're watching this film and it has all the practical stunts that you'd seen in movies before, but done better. Plus the CGI that we've never seen, liquid metal morphing transformations like that ever before. And once again, you look at it so many years later and you go, yeah, this is more believable and convincing than so much stuff that we get today. And it's, once again, they were afraid of it. So they're cutting back and forth between computer graphic and just like pasting things onto Robert Patrick's chest. And so they're using multiple different tricks and they're just cutting between them so quickly that you don't see the cinematic sleight of hand. And it's that level of like, we need to make this believable. What do we need to do is you have a practical thing of CG and you're just going between all of it so that the audience just buys into it in a way that so many movies now, they just don't do that. But yeah, that's one of those ones that was just like, so formative. And I think that same weekend, then we somehow were able to, we went back to my cousin's house and he had the first Terminator. So had that spoiled for me a little bit, but then we watched the second one or the first one after the second one. Maybe that same weekend, but on the same family reunion trip. But Terminator 2 is the one that was like,
I'm glad you put it on your list because it's one of the ones that just missed out on my list. It is one of my favorite films of all time, and I felt like it did have an effect on me growing up, but just not as much as the 5 on the list just now. But it just missed out. However, what an incredible film. And I'm going to, if I can find it, I will be including a clip on this video of Terminator 2 as me as a kid dressed. I would take my arm and put it in my sleeve, and I would crawl along the ground with one arm and kidding on the Terminator, and I would sing the music as in the tune. I would go do 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 do. I would just crawl about the living room as a kid. This film, incredible film. I think I was the same as you though. I think I watched Terminator 2 before watching Terminator 1 because Terminator 2 was so big that everybody wanted to go back and watch the Terminator. Yeah. So I think I got it spoiled for me as well. But I don't really remember if the difference I would have felt if I watched the first one first, etc. But still enjoy both anyway. But yeah, like Batman, just like every other film in this, I would get the toys, the figures. And I remember for Christmas when Terminator 2 came out, my mum got me this Terminator figure where the arm gets replaced. You can put like a real arm on him, the fake arm. And that's the one toy I always played with, like constantly. So many great memories for Terminator. The early 90s.
Going back to what we just talked about, once again, R-rated movie with toys for kids.
Yeah.
There's just like such a, it's fascinating that was such a phenomenon all throughout the 80s, early 90s. And they had them for Aliens as well, and just wild, and it worked.
Yeah,
definitely. Still our favorite movies.
I remember we were one of the first I don't know how we got this, but we were one of the first families in our street to get cable TV. So we didn't have the analog TV where you get 4 channels. We got cable TV that we got Sky Movies and Sky Movies Premiere and stuff like that. And we would always see adverts for films, commercials for films that are coming on. And I always remember the Terminator 2 one because we got it in 1992. I know it came out in 91, but we didn't get it on TV till the following year. I always remember seeing the commercials for Terminator 2 coming on. And I'm like, oh, I can't wait to watch this. And it was the first time I watched it was on cable TV. Obviously, I couldn't see it at the cinema. But I think one thing that connects me to Terminator 2 more than the original Terminator is John Connor, because I'm a kid, a boy, watching a kid being friendly with a Terminator. I just connected with John Connor. Therefore, you connect to Terminator 2 more. Of course, it is, to me, the better film, better action, better CGI, better acting. But I think it's John Connor that just it completes that for me. Like, what age were you when you first watched it? About 10 or something?
I'm pretty sure it would have been 92 as well for me. So I would have been 10.
Yeah, so you're just connecting to that kid who's round about the same age. So you just feel that connection. You feel like you're in the movie. You feel like you're the one that's high-fiving the Terminator, saying "Hasta la vista, baby." You're teaching the Terminator all the moves, and again, it will live with you forever.
It's like a movie that is just so broadly accessible, even as an R-rated movie, to where nobody watched Terminator went, oh, this kiddie movie, they threw a kid in it, and you're like, follow this. But at the same time, it has a kid in it, so it makes it that much more accessible to younger audiences. And some of that is just like, whatever James Cameron, his mainstream sensibilities are like, just, it's crazy, his ability to just make a movie that plays for everyone everywhere.
Yeah.
And obviously, he's had, 3 back-to-back $2 billion films. So like just whatever that is that we're talking about the other one that was the biggest movie of the year before he started making the $2 billion films. And it's just like that whatever his ability to just craft movies that are just so mainstream, but not in a way that feels like they feel like James Cameron movies, but also play for everyone.
Yeah,
and then my kids enjoy them too, and they're putting a Terminator in the theater in a couple weeks. I bought tickets. I'm hoping I can fully convince the wife to let me take the two older kids with us.
Which one? Which Terminator is it?
It's the first one. It's a 1984 series, so it's not quite Terminator 2. I've never seen Terminator 2 in the theater, and they played actually in downtown Austin. There's a theater in front of the Texas Capitol that has a balcony, and Houdini did shows there 100 years ago and stuff. And they played Terminator 2 last month. And I was almost going to go, but it was just too busy. I couldn't make it. So I was like, oh, man. But at least I can see the Terminator in a couple weeks.
There you go. Yeah, because it's the 40th anniversary, isn't it? So makes sense. Right. My last choice is the newest one on my list. I don't know if you noticed, but I went from oldest to newest. And I was 16 when I watched this movie. And it changed my life because of the age that I was. And it was American Pie from 1999. Now, it's obviously not the greatest film ever made. It's not the greatest comedy ever made. But there's just something about a film that talks to me. When I was 16, I didn't talk to my parents about sex or anything like that. You know, it was a taboo subject. Don't know if it was the same with you, but it's just something that we never spoke about. You know, they would let me watch horror films where people getting their heads chopped off, but when a sex scene came on, eyes were covered. You know, so it was a taboo subject.
It's right along with the Star Trek memory of me getting freaked out by the probe. Top Gun. We're watching that, and then Take My Breath Away comes on, and my mom picks me up and runs me out of the room.
I was the same. My mom would be like, "Whoa!" So
it's years later, it was like, "Oh, I understand why," but also, Mom, really? Like, what? At the same time, I get it now.
Well, my kids do the same. Like whenever someone kisses on TV, they cover their eyes themselves. I'm like, right, good. But I learned through film. I learned most of my things that I didn't want to talk to my parents about through film, because obviously we didn't have the internet as easily as accessible as we do today. So you just couldn't.
5 hours per month or whatever.
Exactly. So when American Pie came around, the kids in the film, I know they were older adults, but they were supposed to be like 17, 18 years old. I was 16 at the time. So watching this film, I'm like, right, okay, they're doing things that I do. They're saying things that I say. They're curious about things that I was also curious about as a kid. So when things happen in the film, I won't mention specific things, but when things happen, nothing to do with the pie, but when things happen, I know, when things were happening, I'm like, I do that. Or that's happened to me, but they normalize it in the film, not to say that it's normal for everyone to do certain things, but they normalize it in a way where they say to the audience.
I mean, that's my takeaway, that you did mean the pie when you said they were normalizing things. That's my takeaway from this, is that's what your childhood was like.
I had to mention that, nothing to do with the pie. But when things were happening in the film, it's almost like they're telling us, if you do this or think this, it's okay. You're young, you'll learn, you'll do things you regret, you'll say things you regret, you want to do things that you've never done before. So the film made it okay. It made me feel okay, because I felt like at 16 years old, there was things that I didn't do that other people might have done. And I feel like I'm feeling lonely and left behind, and genuinely felt like the whole world was going to end. But films like American Pie made me feel like, do you know what? You're not alone. You're most likely not alone. There's things that you're thinking about that other people are thinking about. That's just the kind of thematic thing about American Pie. But that is a great comedy to me anyway. I know it's not aged well in terms of the jokes that are in there, but for its time,
yeah, man, you rewatch any R-rated comedy that's over 10 years old, and almost immediately you're like, yeah, they wouldn't do that now.
Yeah,
they can't do that now. And maybe some of that's good, and some of that you go, I mean, the whole point of comedy is to push boundaries and
break that barrier. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's what makes it funny, is that it's inappropriate, that you're doing something you're not supposed to do. Yeah. So I mean, me being just a year or two older than you, this one came out, when I was in high school, just about the same time, same phase of life and everything like that.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because the first two movies in particular were like such big deals to our generation, like gigantic films. And then maybe some of it is just because of the way things have happened over the last 10 years with sensibilities and sensitivity, that it doesn't feel like they're talked about as much as many other iconic comedies that where it was was such a big deal. I wasn't wasn't one that I was as particularly crazy about, but at the same time, I mean, really funny films. You know, I've seen the first two many times, but I don't think was there four in the main series, right?
There was four from the main series.
Yeah, because there's the original trilogy and then Reunion. I don't know. I don't think I ever saw Reunion. And it was the third one. Third one was Wedding.
Yep.
So I don't think I've ever seen Reunion.
Reunion is that's what I was going to say. These are films that grow up with you. So the first one, they're kids, teenagers like I was, but then when you get to Reunion, they've now got kids of their own, and they're the adults. They're the responsible adults, and they're doing things and saying things that us as adults are doing and saying as well. So like you go on this journey over the course of 13, 14 years when they're all filmed, and you're growing with them, and you're like, do you know what? I felt that way in 1999 as your character did. And now 13 years later in American Reunion, I'm now the same age as you again and doing the same thing. You've got a job, you've got a mortgage, you've got kids, you've got responsibilities. So even if they're not the best films, they resonate with you because they're doing the things that you do in real life.
This feels like the most obvious legacy sequel. Like as we're saying, like as you said, like this of like in an era where everything's a legacy sequel, you immediately go, "Well, it's been 25 years." And so so now they have a high schooler, and Jim becomes Jim's dad. And
exactly.
So like it's like the most obvious legacy sequel that has that resonance, but also even playing into how all the things you couldn't do now that we're in the original one, that becomes the punchline to 1,000 jokes as Jim, as the new dad, is saying all the stuff that like back in my day we did this, and then you have the kids that are raised in very different era with very different sensibilities and sensitivities being like, Dad, you can't do any of that. And that becomes the joke, is the generational class of what is and isn't, of what is and isn't appropriate. We need to sit down and write our pitch to Hollywood and get everybody back to do.
It's the perfect legacy sequel. It comes full circle again. You know, like you said, you've got Jim playing Jim's dad now. You know, these characters can become that. You can get a Stifler's mom version of somebody from the films, like maybe Jim's wife Michelle could be Stifler's mom version. But I can't talk about American Pie without talking about Stifler, because Stifler is, whether you love or hate the movies, Stifler's one of those iconic characters that everybody knows. He's the most quotable character in the series, and he's almost as memorable as characters like Jack Burton from Big Trouble in Little China. You know, he's definitely left a mark on me growing up as well, and the films in total. So,
well, I mean, even launching Sean William Scott's career of like that guy was everywhere for 10 years after that movie came out. And like it went back to just like being, fifth build in this movie, but he's the guy that everyone remembered coming out of the movie. Well, even to that Jim's dad, like I was thinking like, what's the name of the lead character in this? What's his son's name? Wait, Jim's dad, his name is Jim. Like I don't remember his name is Jim. I remember Jim's dad. Like I remember it based off of like the other characters in it, which is fascinating. While you remember all the iconic bits too.
Yeah. So that's my fifth choice. Again, I did have some honorable mentions that I don't want to talk about, but I'm going to say them out. I'll tell you the honorable mentions that just missed out without talking about why. And those are Halloween from 1978, Just Before Dawn from 1981, which was the first horror movie that I ever saw, The Never-Ending Story, Labyrinth, Big Trouble in Little China, Career Opportunities from 1991 with Jennifer Connelly, and Terminator 2 Judgment Day. I'm glad you mentioned that one because that's the one that just missed out. Have you got any ones that just missed out apart from Back to the Future?
Yes, there's a couple more to throw on there. I guess go with Scream. So that was like the Kevin Williamson era of horror. Those were my high school years. And so those are kind of the formative ones. And I mean, I even had like the soundtrack for each of the movies.
Yeah.
And that was like my on-ramp for like not just watching something on cable that like I watched Friday the 13th part 6 late at night, but like new, fresh, I'm a part of it as it's happening. And that was the Scream movies. And then total opposite direction, Aladdin. That's where I remember going out, rushed out, bought the cassette tape with the soundtrack, and the version. If you're our age, Arabian Nights had different lyrics to it, where it was like where they'll cut off your hand if they don't like your face. It's barbaric, but hey, it's home. Well, once again, like that you can't say that. They changed it at some point in time, but like I grew up with this cassette tape that was like they cut off your hand if they don't like your face.
I don't even remember those lyrics as well.
Yeah, wow. Pretty quickly, people were like, "Hey, that's maybe not the best thing to say about an entire group of people in a kids movie. What will they know about that part of the world? They cut off your hand if they don't like your face."
Definitely.
The 90s were wild.
Absolutely.
But so then that was the, for Disney movies, that was the one that like had the tape and everything. And we're of that age where there was the Disney Renaissance. So we had like maybe the best run of Disney movies was our childhood. So yeah,
I'm kind of glad we grew up in that. Like The Lion King is my favorite Disney movie, which came out 2 years
mine
after.
Too.
Yeah, so you can't beat The Lion King anyway.
You had to go to Lion King. One more story and favorite movies, and tying back to our Arnold theme. I guess it would be 30 years ago this happened, but was at my cousin Nick's house where I saw the Terminator. Yeah, and we went to the drive-in movie theater, and we went to go see the Lion King. But on the other side was True Lies. And so I don't remember if we just ditched the Lion King and went and watched True Lies, or if we did a double feature, but went and I watched the Lion King and True Lies at a drive-in theater once again for one of these family reunions.
Mm-hmm. That's a great experience. Do you like True Lies? I actually love True Lies.
Yeah. I think I love once again James Cameron. Just he doesn't miss. His Avatar films are my least favorite of his movies.
Yeah, I think same with me. Do you know, it's funny, I've never seen The Abyss. Oh, and I've been told I need to see it.
Yeah, I mean it's a disaster movie. It just also happens to be have some alien elements to it too. But it's a really tense underwater disaster movie.
Yeah.
And so you're thinking like people almost drowning in the movie, and then you hear the behind the scenes and people almost drowned while they were making the movie. So whenever they look terrified, and you're like, there's all these scenes with them like doing this with their mouth just sticking up out of the water, and you're like so uncomfortable watching it. Well, yeah, that's because the people almost died.
Probably are. Jeez, yeah, it's one that's on my watch list. It's been on my watch list for a while. So I think that's us at the end of the road then, Sean. It was great having you on. Every time I watch your videos, I agree with probably 99% of your opinions on film. And I feel like because we grew up in the same era, we had the same opportunities to feel the way we feel about these films, which is great, which is why I wanted you on for this. Like you said at the start, I think we've been trying to do this for about a year and a half now. And it's good that we finally got to do it, which is fantastic. But because you're one of my guests and people will be watching this channel, where can people find you if they don't know who you are?
Yeah, if you can look up Sean Chandler on YouTube, and you will either find a American football player or a guy that looks like me talking about movies. It's the guy that looks like me and is talking about movies. I'm also on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all the different places. If you look up Sean Chandler talks about, this face should appear.
And they'll find you easily. I think you're over 300,000 now, aren't you?
Just shy. I'm 280,000 right now.
Oh, right. Okay, so you'll get there soon, easily, won't you?
Rushing hard, trying to get that momentum to cross over that next milestone.
No, you're absolutely crushing it. But anyway, guys, thanks a lot for watching again. Thanks a lot for subscribing, and we'll see you soon.
Meeting adjourned.
I'll be right back. What are you waiting for, huh?
Coming to get you, Barbara.
Ever played in the cat?
Someone's in the back! See